On today's episode of I Could Talk to You All Day, we are talking about professional development. And before you yawn and shut this off, it's actually a really interesting conversation about how you commit to yourself when you commit to professional development and how you have the opportunity to step outside of what your employer wants or needs and really look at how you want to develop. We're glad you're here. I Could Talk to You All Day is a podcast about what it means to be a leader while also being human. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz.
And I'm John Spears, and we coach executives and leaders just like you about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get the conversation started.
John Spears.
Lauren Lefkowitz.
Here we are.
Here we are.
I'm still sort of enamored by the novelty of us being back. Even though we're like in our third episode of season 2, I'm like really tickled that we're getting to do this again.
I mean, apparently so am I, because I started laughing when you said tickled. I'm so tickled. I feel like I'm back in like the 1950s. I'm so tickled. I am too. I think there's something that's so special that happens when you're like with your people, and whether it's like whether record is on or we're just like catching up, there's just like effervescent, fuzzy, tickled feeling.
Yeah. So awesome. So I want to start with a question for you. And I want you to think back over your career.
Oh boy.
And tell me something professional development wise that you have been required to learn for work that has just made you like roll your eyes.
Something professional development related that's made me roll my eyes. I don't know if there's actually something that fits that category. There's obviously like, particularly when I was in government, there was like cybersecurity training, or there was like finance training and how to use this new system. But I don't know actually if there was ever a thing where like I had to learn something and I was like, about it.
That's fair.
Did I ruin your?
You did kind of ruin my good time.
Okay, how about you?
But...
Obviously, you had some time. You had some things. So let's go back to you.
Well, no, I want to take one level deeper on this like cybersecurity training,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So if you had not had to take this cybersecurity training for work, even if it was sort of like a neutral kind of thing, would you have woken up at any point in time and been like, you know what I'm interested in? Learning more about cybersecurity in my government job.
No.
Okay. There we go.
Okay.
Whew. I think I saved the question.
I'm glad I didn't totally mess that up. Okay. Yes. This is off to a good start. 3 minutes in and we're okay. We're back on course.
I think this episode's gonna work. I think we're gonna make it work.
Okay, good.
When I was in financial services, I worked in HR, but they treated all of us like we were FINRA and SEC regulated. And so we had to do the same like political disclosures. We had limitations on donations we could make. We had limitations on outside jobs and all of that kind of stuff. And the CFA Institute came out with a new certification for non-financial professionals in investment companies. And
Wow.
so it was like the CFA for dummies. And I was the dummy who got in on the pilot, and I had to read this 600-page textbook.
Oh my God.
And learn about equities and fixed income and bonds and stocks. And I mean, I'm falling asleep telling you what it was, right? Like I was totally not interested in it, but it was a pilot and I got asked if I wanted to do it. And if you know me, if I got asked to do something, like I didn't even have to raise my hand for it. They just want me. I'll take it. And so my people pleaser was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll do it. And I spent the whole time thinking, if I weren't working here doing this, then like there's no way that I would be interested in learning anything about this.
Yeah.
I passed the test because
Of
come on, it's
course.
me. I'm actually a terrible test taker. I always like get by just over the passing grade. I'm much better at execution than I am at testing.
Same,
But
same.
but as soon as I finished the exam, I forgot everything. Like I didn't have space in my head for it. I don't have a head for investing or math or, anything like that. And I think about the amount of time that I spent, first of all, reading a 600 plus page textbook, then going back to the parts that I needed to learn more about and rereading and doing some research online, then sitting with the head of our equities team, then sitting with the head of our fixed income team, and like asking questions to get further clarification so that I could get this dumb certificate that I didn't care about at all. So as I was thinking about us preparing for this episode, which is about professional development, it
Prof
occurred to
Dev.
me, what's that?
Prof Dev. I'm in my phase of like
Prof Dev, you're just gonna
I'm just gonna abbreviate everything or shorten
ab-
everything.
abbrev Ev.
Abbrev Ev. Right, right.
Fair.
Fuh. Not the soup.
Um, and I was thinking about like how much time and effort we put into meeting the requirements of our employers,
Mm,
meeting the requirements of our profession, meeting the requirements of what we think we should have in order to have the resume we want to have, in order to have the the certificates or designations that we think we need or that somebody has told us we need in order to excel in our careers. We put all of that time and effort into this, into professional development, and a lot of it we don't really enjoy.
yeah.
And so it got me wondering, like, what do you think it is that makes us stop learning outside of what is required for our careers?
It's a really good question. And as I was thinking about this episode myself, I thought about I had a little bit of a different take of like for me, I've always been super interested in always learning more. I think it just there's this curiosity that I have. And so anytime my company would provide professional development funds, I would take it. If there was like ever opportunities, I would be like max out every year to do it. But what I found is that it was really hard to execute on that, to make the time for it because I was so busy with other things
Mm.
and because culturally professional development was never other than those like sexual harassment trainings or like learn the finance system training. There was not a lot of space or priority given to that in a company. And so I've been really thinking about it of like prioritizing yourself and creating the space because frankly a company is only going to be loyal to you for so much. There's only so much loyalty, and so it's really on us to create the space in our lives to be able to grow and to learn and to be at the leading edge of where we are.
It's so interesting that you said that because the thing that stuck out to me is that you had a professional development budget.
Hmm.
And I think that's pretty special. I have been places where at budget time, there was a professional development budget. And then as we started working through where we had to tighten the belt and slim down and all of those things that are somehow body related, but actually belong to the budget. Um, just realizing that as I'm saying it. Uh, Professional development always got chopped.
Yeah.
And I have been places where it was like, well, let's see what we can find for free or really cheap. We got LinkedIn Learning one year
Oh yeah,
for all of our
totally.
staff, and uh, the there wasn't a ton of usage. And the next year, the CEO was like, "We're out. We're not doing it. If we're
Hmm.
going to pay for something, people should be using it." There wasn't a lot of choice, right? If you didn't want to sit down on the computer and you know be in a virtual one-way training, If that's not your learning style, then LinkedIn Learning wasn't for you. And if that was where the budget went, then, you didn't really have a lot of choices. I've also been places where you had to sort of write a proposal for why you were going to take a certain professional development course, how it would serve you, how it would pay back the company.
Right.
In a lot of cases, I've been places where you had to sign a payback agreement that if you left within a certain amount of time, whether it was education, formal education or certifications or designations or just general development. And so there are a lot of, in the workplace, I think there are a lot of ways in which we are dissuaded from professional development,
Totally.
including, as you said, time and energy and space. Like nobody's boss is saying like, hey, why don't you dedicate 4 hours a week to professional development?
Right.
Just block your calendar and dedicate that.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about what you said is in my last company, there was money allocated for professional development, but we knew that people weren't going to take it. So it was always a buffer. So we had a line item, it was fully funded every year. And we always, based on what we saw from last year's, knew that people weren't, about half of the people would take it. And so we had this chunk of money for other things. And it was
Mm.
consistently like that. And so again, I think that goes back to culture and to, you know, where's the onus for your professional development? Is it on you or is it the company? And how do you really create the space to be able to invest in yourself, in the workspace, not just sort of outside of your 9 to 5, whatever that amount of time is that you work.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Mm.
Is how do you decide that you want to develop professionally? Or how did you decide that you wanted to develop professionally according to your own agenda and not necessarily what the company required or whatever limitations that they offered? Like, when did you start choosing outside of the box of, well, this is my job and this is the thing that's going to help me in my specific job?
I think I realized early on in my career. Well, let me just take a step back. I've always known I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't sort of walk around saying like I know it all and I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm definitely the person that's going to work the hardest, that's going to like figure out the way to do it. Um, I'm the person who has like a really great attitude and is super positive. And I think for me, I credit that a lot to my career success and to where I've gotten. But I think that humility, right? There's always someone smarter than you. There's always someone better than you. I think that awareness and that humility, and I don't say that in like a demure way. It's not cutesy, it's not whatever. I I think I've always just known that there's more for me to learn, and I've been hungry to learn, and I've always wanted to be at my sort of like leading edge. So early on in my career, I've always had that hunger of like, I want to know more, I want to learn more. Um, and I would say that was for a number of years super stifled by the culture of an organization that didn't create the space. And so I realized if I wanted to get better, if I wanted to learn more, if I wanted to sharpen my skills, I have to be my own advocate. No one else is coming to save me. No one else is going to help me prioritize my stuff. No one is going to pay for my own professional development, well, unless your company does. And so I had to be my biggest advocate. And I think I, as I grew in my career, I realized that I really have to take ownership of that. And no one else is going to do it for me. So I would say like that's when I started to do it early in my career. And, I think the way that I've done it, the way that it's sort of materialized in my life is really creating strong boundaries and saying I have to be my own priority. And I'm willing to work super hard. I'm willing to work long hours, or I used to be willing to work long hours. Um, but like I can't put myself at the bottom of my priority list. I have to be at the top because if I'm not well, if I'm not sharp, if I'm not well rested or invested in, then I'm just not going to be of value to myself or to like other people.
It warms my heart to hear you say that. And I'm sure there are other people out there like you who have always like followed that level of curiosity and And I love nothing more than when you and I are coming from such different perspectives on the same thing,
Yeah.
because my whole career, until I started making deliberate changes, my whole career was about who am I looking to please?
Mm,
Who am I performing for? And what do I need in order to be the best performer for that role, those people, that leadership team? And I got really lost in it.
hmm
And I think that there are people who are listening to us in both camps who
Totally.
have said, like, despite what they want me to do at work, I'm going to keep being curious and I'm going to keep learning in different ways and I'm going to keep finding avenues to get educated on what I'm interested in. And there will be people who say, I don't have any time or energy or space for any of that. All I need to do is keep figuring out how to up level where I am. Both of us ended up being really successful executives,
Right.
right? I would like to argue that I got there the harder and less enjoyable way.
I probably agree.
Don't get caught up in stuff, right? But I made it my responsibility to serve others. And what I'm hearing you say is like, yeah, you too, but also you followed your own curiosities and interests.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we've talked about this before. I have a real kind of thing around like I want someone to come save me. I want someone to make it better for me. And I think I've been working through that for a really long time. And from an organizational perspective and a career perspective, I
Yeah.
just realized like that wasn't going to happen. And for me, when I think about my kind of growing up and how I sort of came into the workplace and my career, like I had to really, you know, claw my way up. I felt like, I had to like prove myself. I didn't go to a great school. Um, I didn't have a ton of experiences that when I entered the workforce, other people had. So I had to really work at it. And there have several kind of instances where like I went into jobs and I was qualified, but there were some things that were lacking and I just had to like figure it out. Um, and I think while that was hard, I would argue maybe some parts of my career were kind of maybe more challenging, but it really served me to get where I am. And it really created a way of sort of looking at professional development and prioritizing myself that is serving me now as I've like gone off on my own to start my own coaching firm and sort of how that curiosity has really continued in the space that I'm in now.
So I told you before we started recording that I had a secret quote
Because
saved for that some point in
I
this
stole it
episode.
last time.
No, yeah. Not because you stole it in our first episode,
Sure.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I wanted your live reaction
Okay.
to the quote. And you just set it up so beautifully.
Look at us. Look at us
So,
being in sync.
so I don't know if you know Matthew Hussey. He is a New York Times bestselling author,
Is he
and
like a relationship guy?
he's
Talks
a
about really.
relationship
Okay.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
gives
Yeah.
love life advice. And I saw this quote on Instagram that, he said it out loud. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit because it was, he was giving a whole sort of diatribe. And he was talking about who we are as humans. And he said, if you think about at the beginning of your life, you were given a human, which is you, and you were told you have to take care of this human. Then we go out into the world and we start looking for someone else to show up for us.
Mhm.
But we are our human. The only person who's truly here to take care of me is me. And when you wake up in the morning and you say, what would I do today if I were taking care of my human?
Yeah.
And the answer is completely different to what we do most days. We
Yeah.
beat ourselves up. We don't treat ourselves well. And he said, loving ourselves isn't a feeling, it's an approach, it's a job. And what I heard in what you were just talking about, professional development is a form of self-love. Professional development is taking your job seriously as a curious human who lives outside of the realm of your job and really decides, like, who do you want to be? How do you want things to be? And while I hadn't seen this quote before, hearing it this morning, I thought, that's where I've come to.
Hmm.
It's not where I came from. It's not what I grew up into in my professional life, but it's where I've evolved to. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that quote and how that informs for you this conversation about professional development.
I mean, I think this so much aligns with what I was talking about earlier in my own approach. And it's so similar to really the quote that kind of like shook me out of this kind of mindset of like someone's going to come to save me. Mel Robbins has a really kind of similar quote. She's like, no one is coming to save you. Like you are your own knight on a white horse. And I think that is when I heard that, it was like, gut punch, like it was so, like when something is so true, you just can't get around it. And I feel like this quote is super similar to that. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that we really need to prioritize ourselves. And I think we need to do that for two reasons, particularly now. Um, we are culturally, globally in a time of massive amount of change and new technology, new ways of doing things. And one, I think we should all be lifelong learners. We should all have this approach to like taking in information and being curious. So many of us, this is a little tangential, but I heard someone talking about the importance of reading as an adult and how many of us are basically illiterate. We don't read anymore, right? And we might be able to, but we just don't, we're not consuming knowledge. We're consuming lots of entertainment, we're watching lots of cable news, but we're not sort of learning and growing in the sort of the way that we used to be able to do that. And so one, I think it's super important for us to like have that curiosity, but also like from a pure like survival perspective, stuff is changing so quickly. Like you think about AI, you think of technology, and all of that affects our jobs, our work. And so I would say that from a I would balance both the like curiosity, hungry to learn piece, but also the like stuff is changing significantly in our lives. And like if we're not investing in upskilling and sort of keeping up with trends, then I think this might be a little controversial. I think like lots of people are going to be left behind in a new economy and in the way just the world is going. And I'm afraid that some people are just that's gonna happen because they're just not curious about how things are changing and shifting and their role in that.
Yeah. And I think that applies to workaholism, right?
Totally.
To those of us who go into work and we serve the company and we're too tired at the end of the day to read or listen to audiobooks, which I think both have equal value. I heard somebody say the other day, I can't remember who it was, but it was again in my mass consumption of Instagram or TikTok. Why do you think your eyes are more special than my ears? Reading a book and listening to a book offer the same value, which I absolutely love because I had a grandmother who lost her vision from MS over a bunch of years. And she used to listen to audiobooks and she would always dismiss like, oh, I didn't really read it. I only listened to it. And anyway, that's a tangent that I could go on with for a
But
while.
but
But
I love that, Lauren, because like I think about like James Clear, and he talks a lot about habits. Like if you can stack things together, if I'm driving in a car and I listen to an audiobook, that's amazing, right? Or if I'm
yeah.
doing, chores around the house or going for a walk or taking a bike, like I'm not sort of dissing the audiobook stuff. I think that's super
Oh,
important. I'm
no,
just
I
saying,
didn't think you
yeah,
were dissing
good.
it.
I just want
No,
to make
no.
sure super clear that no one's gonna come after me and
No,
cancel me
no,
for
no.
being
I mean,
like,
the people out there who diss the audiobook. I think that there is such great value in deliberate consumption,
yes, I
right?
think
I
that's the
think,
point. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's the point you were trying to make is that like we can doom scroll all day and really get a lot of good quotes for this podcast on Instagram. But to really enhance the quality of our lives and really develop as professionals and as humans, we have to decide, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm reading, this is what I'm listening to, this is the conference I'm going to, this is the certification or designation or license that I want to get. And I think all too often we kick the can down the road and we say, like, once this season is over, or once this fiscal year is done, or once I get that promotion, or once things calm down, which we know they never do, then I will
Yeah.
do some professional development. And what I've learned when I started on my own professional development path, my chosen professional development path, was that I had a ton of interests that I wasn't pursuing. And I had a ton of interests that I didn't know were things to pursue, right? Like, you and I decided at the same time to get our coaching certifications. And before that, we were both coaches. We were both good coaches. And we learned a lot in our certifications, and it led us both to pursue that as our formal careers. But I also, when I learned to set boundaries and stopped working 80 plus hours a week for my employer and all of those things that I couldn't have done without working with a coach, I also became a certified laughter yoga instructor,
I love that so much.
which, like, is one of my favorite things about me, that
Yeah.
I know how to help people laugh deliberately, and that's a form of breath work and practice that is accessible to anybody at any athletic ability, at any level. And it wouldn't have even occurred to me to look into that until I actually had space in my head to get curious again.
Yeah.
So I saw like idea bubbles over your head as I was
I have so
saying that.
many.
What are you thinking?
I mean, I think there are two things that really um, came out when you were talking. One is I think what you're saying, and you didn't use this word, but I think you're saying this is being intentional,
Yeah.
like having some intentionality around learning and growing professionally. That's number two. What number one, and number two, the thing that I found that has given me that I feel like has really changed my life, especially over the past few years when we've been on this journey. We got certified, we did a training program. We've both been exploring different things that we're learning about. Is there when you begin to get curious and to foster that curiosity and to like consume it, or like kind of um fill that kind of curiosity. What I've experienced is like childlike wonder. Like the world just gets so much more interesting. And when that happens, like my whole perspective on life has shifted. Like there's curiosity that sort of like flows in all areas of my life. Instead of thinking like I know it all or I have it all figured out, I'm much more willing to go into a situation and to ask questions than I did before. I'm much more willing to seek to like understand someone else's point of view now than I did before. And so there's this kind of secondary effect that I found that's happened in my life. One is gaining knowledge, gaining expertise, sharpening my tools, but also just this kind of more openness to the universe, and I think a while ago, maybe this was like last season, or maybe it was this season, we were talking about like the wonder of the like how big the universe is. Like there's so much out there and like so much we don't know. That's just something that gives me like it's so energizing for me, like how small I am and how much is out there to learn and to know. It's just super like childlike awe, wonder that kind of happens with me.
So if you are doling out advice, we usually give some tools, but today I'm going to ask us to dole out a little bit of advice. If I am a person who is working in a job and I'm listening to this episode and thinking like, wow, that's really nice for you guys that you found things to be interested in. But what about me over here who's been doing my finance or marketing or other leadership oriented job for a long time and I haven't even thought about professional development? Where would you tell somebody to start ideating?
Three things. One is follow your interests. It doesn't have to be necessarily work related. Like just follow your interest. Start investing in things you're interested in learning. One of the things I did was um, I used this for my professional development is I did a yoga teacher training program. And you might think, well, what does yoga and teaching yoga have to do with leading other people? A ton, actually. It helped me find my voice. It helped me breathe. It helped me realize that the way we do one thing is the way we do anything. So I would just sort of like go out there and ex kind of explore your interest, number one. Number two, trial and error. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. You can explore something and be like, and not be interested in it. And that is like totally fine. We bring this sort of perspective of perfection into everything. And we're like, oh, if I'm going to like do this, I want to do it right. Like just go out and do it. Like just go try, just explore your interests. Doesn't have to be perfect. And the third is around create sustainable boundaries. Again, as humans, particularly in our culture, I think we just so many of us deprioritize ourselves, and we are the last thing on our priority list. We might say, "Oh, I want to prioritize myself. I want to prioritize this." But like when it comes down to actually operationalizing it and doing it, we just don't do it. And so I think making sure that you're prioritizing your own development, super, super important. Those are the three things I would say. How about you,
Yeah.
Lauren?
I would say start with getting curious
Hmm.
in the form of take a trial of something like LinkedIn Learning or Masterclass or something like that, or look at what your library is offering or a meetup group or something like that. That could just be your toe in the water. Would I like this? I don't know. Let me give it an hour of my time
Mm-hmm.
and see if I might like it and see if it makes me more interested or if I've just like scratched that itch of seeing what it could be. And, you know, that's enough for me. So that's the first thing is that I would say, like, one of my clients always says, lead with curiosity. And I think that's just such a brilliant motto to just wonder, like you said, wonder. And I would also say, designate time. We get so busy serving others, whether
Yeah.
we have partners or children or parents or responsibilities with volunteer stuff that we do or with our jobs, whatever it is, there are obligations all over the place. And most of us, when we need to go to the doctor or have a dental cleaning or something like that, we make the time for it. We designate the time for it. We show up for it on time because that's what we've said we're going to do. So I say make a commitment to yourself and block the time and hold that time sacred. And if you do that, if you practice that, and we're going to talk about practice in another episode this season, but if you start practicing designating time for yourself, then you're giving yourself the gift of time to invest in whatever you might be interested in. And like, do something ridiculous, like laughter yoga. Do something ridiculous, like basket making. I have a friend who makes baskets now because that's what she had time to do. And she was interested in it. And she just messaged me the other day and said, I have a new basket and I have no place to put it, but I have a new basket. And there's just such delight in the fact that she's doing it for the sake of doing it because she enjoys it.
Mm,
Yeah.
totally. I love that.
John, I could talk to you all day about this,
Me too. Me too.
but we're out of time.
Ugh, how does this happen every week? I'm like,
I know every time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this episode. We're so excited to be here with you every couple of weeks, and we'll see you next time.
we're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. And join us next time for more Real Talk.